One of the things we've been doing this fall is drying food in our oven. Though we have dried some food before, mainly apples, that has been with an electric food dryer. Our electrical system at home cannot support an electric food dryer, and having lost the place we previously used it due to the pandemic, we decided to take advantage of the residual pilot light heat from our oven. Our propane stove has 3 pilot lights, one of them in the oven, which burn propane very slowly, and thus the oven does stay slightly warmer. We mostly have been drying tomatoes as we have already made the full amount of our typical tomato products we make and have more than we want to eat fresh. But we also have been experimenting with other things. One of those is carrots. As carrots are something that are good both raw and cooked, we were wondering if it is better to cook them prior to drying or dry them raw. These carrots I am using are our second line that are not good enough to store in sand in our root cellar. In order to accomplish this test, I am going to take a random half of these carrots and steam them. 12 minutes of steaming, and these aren't like fully cooked to the degree that I would want them to be cooked if I was like eating them right away. But one of the uses of this would be putting these in soups, and there they would get cooked some more. Though these are reasonably cooked, they're definitely more cooked than raw. They're pretty easy to put the fork into and then fall off the fork, not an insignificant amount. So I'll spread these out and then I'll stick this into the oven and check on it periodically. 10.5 hours later, and pull the carrots out of the oven, and you can see they've dried some. They're still very much not anywhere near dry. Honestly, the ones that were uncooked seem a little bit drier, but it's hard to tell entirely because the sizes are so variable. As you can see, we're drying other stuff in the oven at the same time, so this isn't like a good test of like speed of drying other than directly comparing these two to each other. The total amount of drying time isn't like a good benchmark. The next morning, another 12.5 hours later since the last time I checked, and the carrots have visibly shrunk down, whereas last time that wasn't as clear, but they're still pretty soft and bendable and very much not completely dried. And that they've also, the shrinking down has caused some of the smaller ones to fall through these gaps. And well, we've collected them, so those are drying out. And these are more dried than the other ones, but they still need more time. Another 12 hours later, and these carrots, though they are pretty dry, they still aren't what we consider completely dry. They're still like somewhat bendable. And part of this is we're trying to dry these out really well, so they're super dry and don't appear to have any water in them, because we don't really know how well these would last with like this little bit of water in them. That they might be okay, but we just don't want to take the risk of them getting moldy because we haven't done any testing on them to see if they last in this factor, and it doesn't take too much effort to dry them out for longer. So it's been about another 14 hours since I last showed this, and that brings it to a bit over 48 hours total of that these were drying in the oven. And they're pretty dry. They aren't like 100%, like I can bend it a little bit, but they're dry enough for the purposes that I'm going to use these, I'm pretty sure. So it is particularly noticeable, like these start out pretty large diameter, and now they're down to, I'd say they shrunk by about half to like half their diameter. There does not seem to be any difference in drying between the cooked and uncooked ones. I'm going to test these dried carrots in 2 different ways. One is just eating them raw, and the other is trying to rehydrate them somewhat in this case, recently boiled water. One aspect that we considered for this is rehydrating in like a soup where they're like cooked for a while, but I'm just using some recently boiled water as a substitute for that. And you might wonder why I was willing to just throw those in without like having to have 2 separate cups. It's because I can see a pretty distinct difference between the ones that I cooked beforehand and the raw carrots. The raw carrots have a much more defined black edge where the skin was, and the color on the insides isn't as distinctly orange as the cooked carrot, which is really quite noticeable. So now for trying them, I'm going to start with the raw carrot. It's a little bit bendy. Pretty good, actually. And now for a cooked carrot. It's honestly not as good. The carrot flavor in it seems to have been lost somewhat. Whereas the raw carrots had a pretty distinct carrot flavor in them. As cooked carrot, I'm only getting it like much later on in the process. But both are acceptable to eat. Neither is like particularly bad to eat. They're both pretty acceptable. And now on for they've been at least slightly rehydrated. I'm going to start again with a raw carrot. Some of the orange colors definitely come back on these. That's crunchy. And the carrot flavor isn't as distinct. And now for a cooked carrot, though it's a lot easier to eat since it's been rehydrated. Oh, yeah, that's all the crunchiness that I felt in that raw rehydrated carrot is gone. The unrehydrated carrots were both chewy, and so I think the amount of time it took me to like chew them up somewhat made it so any crunchiness that like I found in the raw carrot here had disappeared in those ones. After retrying all the options, the conclusion I come to is that if you're just wanting to eat them dry as carrot chips, the raw carrots are just a little bit better than the cooked carrots, but not by that much. If you're wanting to eat them rehydrated, the cooked carrots are substantially better than the raw carrots. And I'm not entirely sure why there's that difference, but it's very clear that the cooked carrots are better once they've even been rehydrated this little bit. I'm not sure the amount that if you actually like boiled these, if the raw carrots would be better or worse than the cooked carrots. Overall, I'm glad that I did this experiment because going forward, we'll be able to know what we're like the purpose of what we're making it for and which carrot is better for that particular application if we do dry carrots in the future. One of the interesting things I noticed is that the color of the water that was being used to steam the carrots, it's like more green, whereas I would expect to be more orange because carrots are orange, and normally the water kind of follows the color of whatever you're steaming. I've found, but just an interesting little note that the water coming off from steaming the carrots is green.